games.
I'm Mac Reynolds. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Night Street Games.
Hi, I'm Matthew Berger. I'm the game director at Night Street Games.
My name is Jonathan Jelinek, and I am the general manager at Night Street Games.
So let's talk about Night Street Games. How did this company start, and what is it all about?
The company started a little over 2 years ago. My brother and I, had dreamed of making games since we were kids, and finally found the opportunity to, quietly begin building a studio. And so we built a prototype of our first game, Last Flag. And after that, we started kind of quietly compiling this great team of folks, and we're lucky enough to be able to work with people who built some of the greatest games we've ever played. And, now today, we've got people like Matthew and John working alongside us, which is phenomenal.
So, Matthew, John, talk about how you guys got involved with Night Street, and a little bit of your background for people who aren't familiar.
I'm Matthew Berger. I've worked in the games industry for about 25 years. I've worked at studios like Relic Entertainment, where I worked on a lot of Warhammer games like Dawn of War and Company of Heroes. I worked at Blizzard, where I worked on Diablo, a lot of Diablo 3, Diablo console, all of the Diablos really. And now I'm at Night Street. Mac and I had a chat. He let me play the game right away, and I immediately was like, oh, cool, awesome, blah, 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 with all the rapid fire ideas, because I get when I get invested, when I love a game, I go 100 right away. And he and I really vibed, and I think it just from there on, it's just that was it. It never stopped.
I've also been in the industry about 20 years. I've been doing MMOs most of my career. So I started on World of Warcraft, and then from there, I was an artist on World of Warcraft. Then I was doing art and then production on a game called WildStar. The way I got introduced to this product, I was talking to a venture capital group called Bigcraft, and they wanted to talk to me about working on another MMO, and I was like, I don't want to do another MMO as much as I can help it. And I absolutely love Capture the Flag. So I used to play Unreal Tournament Capture the Flag back in the day, so for me, this was an absolute dream project. And after I met Mac, I was still I'm not really sure, let's see how it goes. And then he said, just play the game. Just sit down and play the game. I sat down and played the game, and then I couldn't help myself, and I was hooked and joined right after.
Mac, did I put on my investigator reporter hat? You and your brother wanted to do games for a while. That was the case? You always wanted to do this, and that pesky music career got in the way?
Strangely enough, it's very fair to say. In fact, I actually found, this is a true story, very recently, maybe a month or two ago, found digging in my closet this paper from my third grade, and it was, what do you want to be when you're older? And I wrote, run a game studio, which is very weirdly specific. And kids, you often dream of making video games, but for us it was really real. It was a huge part of our childhood. We had a bunch of brothers, growing up we all played games together, and Dan is a decent coder. I'm a very bad amateur 3D modeler and animator, and this was a dream for us that we were finally able to realize, and it's honestly been, one of the most fulfilling chapters of my life in terms of being able to be a part of something that feels special.
So what can you tell us about the game that you were allowed to say, that you're allowed to talk about? Because I know it's still probably in development, lots of under wrap, lots of back and forth.
So the idea for the game came, Dan and I grew up playing Capture the Flag in the woods as Boy Scouts. And we were thinking about that experience, and the Capture the Flag, mostly game modes, right, in the 90s and the 2000s that were lots of fun, never really scratched that itch of what it meant to hide and to find, and the thrill of nature, and being a hero, and all these other kind of components that were more watered down to a, payload escort, if you will. The predictable location for the flag. So we started with this thesis of, okay, what would pure Capture the Flag feel like today? What would a definitive Capture the Flag game feel like? And quickly learned that actual hiding and finding was a big differentiator, and it took us a bit to kind of work out the game loop to make that replayable and fun over and over again. And from there it's now developed into I would say a casual competitive controlled chaos, super fun short game loop, and every game feels different because you actually get to hide the flag.
Yeah, you're also forgetting 5v5, and your characters are these big, over-the-top personalities, right? They're all heroes. They all have their unique abilities. It's set in the 70s, so it's got this really kind of cool, groovy vibe to it. It lets it really stand out from other games because it just looks so different, and it also lets us do very big, very over-the-top, abilities and powers. We always want you to we want to smile. Every time you hit a button, whether you were successfully managed to down an enemy or not, you should smile at what you're seeing, the animation, the effects, the music that goes with it, the audio. So that's a key component.
Do I get to call people squares in the game?
You don't get to yet. But here's what I will give you. One of the cool things we have in the game is, so you'll down an enemy, right? You deplete their health. They go into a down state, and when they're in their down state, someone can come and revive them. or you can finish them off. And when you finish them off, every time you get a unique, cool animation. So, for example, one of our character, he loves riding a motorcycle. So when he executes you, his motorcycle appears and he rides over you and pushes you down. So you could totally imagine a situation where a character comes up to you and goes, does the little square motion and stomps on you, kind of like in Pulp Fiction, and sends you down. And Pulp Fiction actually is sort of an inspiration for us because we like Tarantino cool. And so that fits really well for this. So there you go.
Yeah, our goal is to have a game where every minute, every hero can have some kind of memorable moment they're making from the beginning to the end. And so everything's kind of larger than life. And being in this kind of game show in the 70s gives you this like beautiful backdrop for showing off. We really hope that, I hope the Team Fortress 2 players like it, but I also hope Super Smash Brothers players like it. And, Rocket League players. It's a very inclusive type game in terms of the type of players who can make a difference on the battlefield, right? If I am not a great shooter, but I love...
Which you're not.
Okay, yeah, we're gonna have to edit that in post. This is actually true, I'm not that great. You might really, really love and excel at finding the flag, or sneaking in and taking over these radar towers that help you find the flag. So there's all these kind of different things you can be doing throughout the game in a very, very short loop. So you're killing these cash bots that let you kind of level up your team, and it's shared, that currency shared with your team. You're finding the enemy flag, bringing it back to your home base, and you're defending it for 1 minute to win. And that's the funnest part of the game, right? Everything comes to a head. You're like batting down the hatches, like Matthew, get on the roof, call out where they're coming from. John, like block the door. And so you have all these things happening very, very quickly in a game loop that's different every single time you play.
Yeah, so the heroes too, one of the things I love is in your ultimate, you were talking about, call someone a square. You can pull out your bazooka and you're going to pull it out and you're going to say adios. There's like ultimates that the characters have, and those abilities can contribute to the overall experience as well, which is a lot of fun.
Like CTF was a very popular mode for a hot minute there. Halo, Team Fortress 2. But people forget, like one of the longest lasting modes that's still popular to this day is Warsaw Gulch. And you have some Blizzard talent here. I mean, I still play Warsaw Gulch, one of my favorite arenas. Like, what did you guys pull from your experience at Blizzard that added to the team at the development for this game?
Well, one of the things I actually pulled from Blizzard isn't necessarily directly linked to Warsaw Gulch, but there was this one philosophy at Blizzard that I really embraced, which was being careful not to erase all the rough edges in a game. They give you texture, right? That's what makes the game kind of stand out and feel fun. And that's the thing, we're always very careful when we're making things in our game. We're always looking for those moments like, this moment that feels maybe a little bit bad, is it actually really good? Are you having a good time? Is it helping you with the game? So that's a thing that we're always very careful, because everybody's obviously gameplay is king and all that sort of stuff, but that one I always felt is a little bit of secret sauce. And it's little things like, okay, this is getting into the weeds, but you're gonna respawn. Nobody likes waiting to respawn, but you have to have a certain respawn time, and it has all of these ripple effects, and trying to figure those things out, that's one thing that I keep going back to.
Something else I always loved from being there was easy to learn, difficult to master. So how can something also be novel but familiar? And so people that play our game should be able to pick it up, whether you've played a tactical shooter, whether you've played, I don't want to say an MMO, but any game that you've played, you can come in and understand the concepts really well. So like you were talking before, where capture the flag is one of several different game modes. Well, we have capture the flag, escort, we have control points, we have radar towers. All of that's in one session, and all that's really familiar, and it's really easy to understand as well. So you're just combining a lot of those elements. So it is really easy for folks who come from different genres or different games to onboard and then understand the game and then excel at it.
Yeah, just a small note. I mean, the difference between Last Flag and some of the other great Capture the Flag game modes we've all played growing up is this game was built from the ground up to support Capture the Flag. So that's the heroes and their abilities. It's the map design. It's the game mechanics. Everything is about kind of supporting that hiding and finding game loop and making it as fun as possible. And it makes for a different type of experience than the other CTF modes.
Yeah, Blizzard also did a great job in games with characters that have big personalities. You've really fallen in love with their characters. And that's also been something that's been very important with us. We want you to love the characters. We really want you to be like, oh man, the Archer, she's so cool. She's got this rocker aesthetic. I can't wait to play her. But the other thing that I've always, been a little bit in the back of my head is there's some characters in certain games I'm like, this character's dope. I'm not good enough to play that character. I guess I'll never get to play them. And that was something that I really wanted to try and alleviate as much as possible in our game. Like, you like the archer, you should be able to play the archer. You may not be as good as, someone who's got pinpoint accuracy, but you are able to play her in a way where you're effective and you can help your team, so that if you fall in love with the character, you're not kind of gated from her in the game.
But one of my questions is, I feel like the world hero shooter has now gotten like the stigma on it for some reason. But Overwatch, Marvel Rivals, and The Last Flag. Like, how do you differentiate yourself from games like Marvel Rivals and Overwatch?
That's a great question. One thing, earlier you were asking about, the square, and I love that question because I found that really fun, and it kind of speaks to something that goes to the heart of our game. Is we want our heroes to be fun, we want them to be over the top, and we want the game to have this old school experience where there's this controlled chaos that you're running into, and all the abilities, they should be over the top, right? So our weapons engineer, like, she can summon a little turret. Oh, that's cool. But she can also teleport things around. So she can create, like, she puts her turret down in front of a door, then she teleports you behind the turret, right? And you're disoriented, the turret's shooting at you, and then she uses her ultimate, and tornadoes grab you, and she can shoot acid with her main weapon, and the tornadoes can absorb the acid, and now there's this acid tornado flinging you around, right? We really wanted our characters to have these really big personalities and their abilities to be a little bit quirky and feel different, so that, again, you have this joy when you're using them. The other thing we discovered along the way, this wasn't intended, but we discovered opportunities along the way to synergize between some of the abilities. So the example I was giving with the weapons engineer, her tornado, it can pick things up, so it can pick up the acid, right? And so, the Alejandro, our soldier, he has these electrified bolas. So he can throw the bolas, and if they hit the turret on the weapons engineer, they disable them for a while on an enemy turret, right? If he throws them at the jail cell of a bounty hunter who's his ally, it does extra damage to the person inside the jail. So creating these moments where not only do you have your abilities and they're very effective on their own, but you look for opportunities to use them in concert with your allies, and they do something maybe unexpected but logical, and you're like, this is cool, I found a thing, I didn't think it would do that. So that's, I think, one way of making them stand out.
Yeah, two other small things. One is, a lot of times things like music and story are an afterthought in a shooter. We really want to turn that on its head. So the music's all real instruments made from scratch, right? There's a rich underlying story about this media mogul, Victor Fex, and he's created this game show, and it's like you're asking yourself, well, why? And there's something kind of sinister Omega Mart about it, right? That you kind of start peeling back layer after layer. We want to take people on a journey with that game in a way that's a little unusual for a shooter. And then the second thing I'd say is we really think about the shooting and other components as in support of Capture the Flag and not the other way around. This is a Capture the Flag game where you can also shoot things and do some crazy fun stuff. And so, yes, it is a smart shooter, but it's Capture the Flag first.
Yeah. Oh, I was going to ask for Smash TV and Running Man. Like, I feel like there's some type of DNA in there for those two things as well.
Running Man, there's definitely a little bit of DNA. And Omega Mart, it's funny because Mac mentioned Omega Mart, and I hadn't been to Omega Mart at first, right? And I got to visit it in Vegas, and it's this surreal place. I don't know if you've ever been there. It looks.
Oh yeah, it's like a UFO themed thing, and they have a bunch of rooms, and like
you walk in, and it's like a supermarket. It's it's super bright and very cheerful, and then you start to look at the products on the shelves, and they're a little bit weird, and then you go through the ice cooler, and now you're in the background, and there's like all this like conspiracy laden weird experiment stuff happening in the background. And that's, again, like Running Man, Omega Mart, Severance, those are kind of interesting inspirations and touchstones for us of like, what is really going on here? Because there's definitely several layers beneath each layer that, it's like, it's not what you think it is. And you first get hit with the hyper commercials, during your matches, you'll get like ads, the announcers are like, they're shilling, action pants, Man of Action wears action pants, Pharaoh Funeral Services go like a pharaoh, like they have all these things, and so at first it's like, okay, they're just trying to sell me stuff, normal TV show. But actually, there's several layers beneath that players will get to uncover.
We often use, when we talk about references for tone for our game, for action, we talk about Team Fortress 2. It's very stylized, very bombastic, very over the top. We love the humor of Portal, right? It's very tongue-in-cheek. Right. It's smart humor. You feel like you're in on the joke. And then there's this conspiracy that's kind of like out of X-Files. And that's where the Omega Mart comes in, right? You're like peeling back layer after layer, and you think you're You think you're at baseline, and then you find something else. And so, we're really excited to provide a lot of discovery opportunities for players. That's one of our kind of pillars of our game is magic and discovery. And so watchful people are going to find things in the map. They're going to find things in the music. They might find things in our trailer. They're going to find things that help them get ahead of the story and go a little bit deeper than the surface level.
Yeah.
You'll also discover there's different ways to play the game as well. So I think a differentiator for us is if you're competing, a lot of times in other shooters, you'll find yourself always funneling down a lane and you always have to be part of the ball and you always have to be doing team fights. There's lots of opportunities for players to play a little bit differently. So if you find yourself being overpowered in a shooting match, you can say, you know what, I'm going to try to sneak behind the enemy lines and try to find the flag a different way. Or, you know what, I think we should shift strategies a little bit and we're going to try to power level our team a little bit by collecting cash bots, collecting a little bit more money, and upgrading our abilities. So there's an interesting meta where you can shift the way that you're playing as you're going through this as well. So you discover as you're playing, the match and the dynamics shift also, and the way that you're playing shifts based on what's happening throughout the match.
Yeah, that's one of the unique strengths I think of the game is the phases of the game really naturally flow from one to the other, and they flow back and forth because sometimes you'll be in the flag has been hidden. You're kind of this early game. You're looking for the enemy flag. You're fighting for control. You want to keep your eye on the radar towers because they help you, and then the enemy finds your flag, and all of a sudden you've completely changed. Like they're trying to bring it back to their base. You have changed. You're in chase mode. They bring it back to their base. Now it's a 60-second counter. Oh my God, they're defending. You have to attack. You managed to grab the flag back. You managed to return it, and now things have reset. Now all of a sudden it's almost like the phases go back. Now they need to get your flag again. Are you going to shift into defending? You still need to find their flag. And so there's this constant ebb and flow. The other neat thing is, and I promise this is true, I don't think I've played, of the hundreds of games we've played, I don't think I've played a single game of Last Flag where I felt I was out of it. I've played many games where my team was getting its ass handed to it, and even in those games, I wasn't out of it. And some of those games, a non-insignificant number of them, we won because it just takes a little bit of you managed to finally find the flag, even though you were on the back foot. You got a little lucky in bringing it back to the pyramid. Your ultimates were up. You managed to get a few lucky kills or whatnot, or you just really, in this tighter space, you did a better job, and all of a sudden you pull the win out. And our games are, by design on the shorter end. The average game is 10 to 15 minutes, but the maximum right now for the core game is 20 minutes. There's an overtime mechanic. And so that really leaves it so that even if you lose after that 15 or 20 minutes, you're like, you know what? I'm ready for another one. I'm ready for our revenge, right? This is why whenever we do playtests with people, the second match is always named the revenge match because Mac names the matches, and he always the grudge match. So match 2 is always grudge match because he's always lost match 1, and then match 3 is always this one is the one that counts because he's always lost match 2. But then he usually wins match 3 for some reason.
It's the one that counts.
Yeah, I know.
I keep bringing up your history at Blizzard just because I feel like that studio has such a deep class recognition with as far as visual aesthetic and mechanically. People Necromancer, they know what they're talking about probably because they played a Blizzard game. Druid, I think World of Warcraft. And I feel in this game you guys have brought that too, that mechanically and visually, that same kind of aesthetic. Is that your goal to try to create these characters and these classes that are just instantly recognizable? When you think Archer, they'll think you're Archer, right? You think Soldier, they'll think you're Soldier.
Yeah, especially on the aesthetic side. So one of the Brian, our art director, is not here, but one of the great things is when we first started looking at our characters, he did all these thumbnail sketches. We did all these ideas on who the characters could be and what they could do. We did all these thumbnail sketches, and throughout the development, as we narrowed and we figured out who we wanted the characters to be, he was always very big on silhouette. You have to be able to distinguish their silhouette, right? Even before they're pretty, even before they look great, all that silhouette. So there was a huge kind of work on that, and we wanted all the characters to obviously have their own big personalities and feel very different from one another. On the gameplay side, it's interesting because they're not quite pure classes, and the reason is it goes back to this idea of the phases constantly changing. So if we made a character that was purely a tank, right? We have our lumberjack Peter. He's a big guy. He's got these axes he can throw, and they come back to him. He can pull them back. Well, what happens when you're chasing the flag carrier? What happens when you need to run, right? What happens when you need to cover ground? What happens when you have the flag and you're being chased? What happens if you have to defend the flag? If you have to attack to get the flag back? So even though our characters, they all lean into a primary fantasy. He's a big guy. He's gonna hit you. He's gonna hit hard. We structured them in such a way that they're never out of it in any phase of the game. They might be stronger in some situations. You really don't want to run into him up close. But even at a certain range, like he can throw his axe and pulls the axe back, and when he pulls the axe back, it'll knock you towards him. So that helps him kind of, close that range with you. So we always think of our characters as being able to like be effective in all phases of the game.
I feel like that's something too. Like in HOTS, I keep playing a picture game side. Like there's a team dynamic there, but it sounds like you still want that there, but you don't want it just solely dependent on you need all 3 people there to defend something. You play this role, you can't do any damage if you play this role. You can't heal unless you do this role.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct.
Yeah, I think if you look at Team Fortress 2, that's a great game to use as an analogy. Like, there's lots of players that can contribute to the game in a series of ways, and you don't need to have the perfect team comp. And the team comp can adjust and flow as that game adjusts and flows as well. So in that game, you're shifting your role as the match progresses. You're like, oh, we need a healer and we need the heavy right now. So that's going to be what we kind of shift to, or the engineer's doing this. In our game, it's kind of similar in a way where as you see the overall dynamic of the match changing, you also see people playing a little bit differently as they're moving through that as well. So it allows you to kind of shift, but people can do everything. So you can participate in any situation, but you can also decide, this thing is happening in the match, and I want to shift to participate in the game in a slightly different way as well, which is really exciting because that also adds another layer of like dynamism, more dynamic. Dynamicism, yeah, it's slightly more dynamic, and that's a ton of fun as well because that also adds another layer of variability, which makes it really fun. You're like, oh wait, this thing's happening. Let's shift our strategy a little bit this way. So it's another layer of meta on top.
And by shift our strategy, I think what John's getting at is you can change characters during a match. So that also lets you kind of go, you know what, I'm struggling right now with the archer because I'm not very good with her for whatever reason, or the situation says like, you know what, I think I need somebody who's a little bit more defensive. I'll play the weapons engineer. So the weapons engineer is slightly more defensive because she can put down her turrets, so I'm going to shift over to her, right? So that you can also adapt. Although what's interesting is in our internal playtest, I love to switch characters. I'm constantly switching the characters. A lot of people just like, this is who I'm playing right now, and they really just like, they tunnel into it, and that doesn't stop them from being able to like really carry the game when necessary. So that's I think that's good.
Now, one of the big questions that's been debated for like a long time now since arena shooter became a genre is 5v5 over 6v6. How'd you guys decide on that number on the 5v5 things? Obviously in MOBA it's been a staple forever, but hero shooter's gone 6v6, 5v5, 6v6. Like we're still trying to find that balance there. How did you guys decide on 5v5 specifically?
That's a good question. Yeah. And honestly, I want to say the prototype was 5v5 initially, and we tried. We kind of we went back and forth, and we almost made 2 decisions at the same time, which is we lowered to 5v5, and then we structured the map around that. And that's really important because you have to have a map that's large enough for you to hide the flag and have to look for the flag, while also not being so large that all of a sudden you're spread out, right? You need to be able to go into the action very quickly. And so it kind of became this symbiotic, relationship between map size and team size that really worked for Capture the Flag. And we've replicated now to multiple maps, and it feels good. So for us, 5v5s, that's the right groove.
And then when does your game come out? Closed beta test? Like when can people sign up for that? Where they can find more information about the game?
Well, you can't find any information about it yet, and we're not ready to talk dates just yet. But we are moving at a very deliberate speed, and it's coming along, and we're excited to show people. Peel back that curtain for the first time in June.
All right, then I have one music question for you, Mac. Just as someone who's had a very successful music career, with your brother and your band, what's the biggest misconception from an outsider looking in at that success? The touring, the multiple #1 hit singles, the managing, like what's a big misconception you think people don't understand about that industry?
Man, that's a big one. Man, I could think of a lot of misconceptions. I mean, I think the first one is, I think there's a misconception of how great. There is a high that comes when you go on stage and people are cheering for you, but it is followed with the low of coming off stage and going back to a hotel room. And I think one of the misconceptions is how difficult actually touring life is mentally. It's very, very difficult. Not being centered in a home is a really, really hard thing. And so, waking up at a different hotel sounds very glamorous. It's not so glamorous. You do it because you love to be on stage and you want to share and you want to, you feel connected to people. But there's a sacrifice for that. So I'd say that's one, and I'll give you one more. Sorry, you shouldn't have asked. I think another one is a lot of artists focus very much on the spark that will give them their moment, right? Like if I can play on late night TV, or I can, be on the radio or whatever, like I'm gonna have success. And 99 out of 100, it really doesn't make a difference, especially in a vacuum. And really, this is where I find a correlation, I think, to gaming, which is at the end of the day, it's about the community, right? And every fan or every player that you're adding to that kind of, it's like wood in a bonfire, and you're building it slowly. It's like hand-to-hand combat of like, this is what I'm making, this is what we're doing, do you feel a part of this? And if you focus on that and you forget about everything else, I think it usually works out, because you can see something measurable that you actually can control, which is my relationship with that community, the community growing. And then when that spark comes, wherever it comes, it's going to burn longer and better forever, because you've got this group of people now who are in your corner.